Thanks for your patience, guys. We'll kick it off. Thank you for joining us on this fine last day of the conference with probably what is your regret and joy from perhaps karaoke last night. We are here to present a digital salary study, talk about radical transparency. My name is Alison Koch.
And I'm Anjuli Maniam, and we'll give you a little bit of background about us first. So I'm the Assistant Director of Exhibition Media at the 9/11 Museum. I work in the museum department, which is actually only one of 5 arms of our institution.
And I used to work in the museum department as Anjuli's counterpart, but I've recently moved over into the IT department, which is structured under the administrative arm of the institution. So what's our beef? So it's a little bit personal, but it's also having to do that we're a little frustrated with what the formal research is available in terms of salaries for digital roles at museums. So just my sort of personal story is that this is the first time I've worked at a nonprofit museum institution. I have worked in mission-based organizations and in technology for the majority of my career, but I've always been working for organizations that have supported or kind of been adjacent to them. So again, being radically transparent, I took a $20,000 pay cut to work at the institution that I work at, and it's taken me about 3 years to kind of scrape my way back up to within a couple $1,000s of where I started. And part of the reason that that was a possibility is that I accepted a role in a different department, that the IT department just values salary slightly differently than the museum side. So the other sort of tidbit that we'll get to, and I'm sure some people in this room also feel the pain of, is that I was an internal candidate for the position that I ultimately accepted, and the range was sort of posted, but because they knew my previous salary, it was also a battle to get the market rate for my job, considering it was considered a significant raise and they did not want to set a precedent. So it's definitely endemic, but that's sort of why we wanted to just gather better information so that we could be poised to argue for our cases. Sure.
And on my side of things, Alison used to be on my team, and I unsuccessfully was able to retain her on my team, which was completely fair. We live in New York City, we have to make financial decisions, and I supported her move over, knowing that she's an ally now in another department. But for us, even though we all want to break down silos and work better with other departments, it was key for me to have, good people, talented people on my team. And so how do I continue to retain them and grow my team, knowing that I have to kind of offer competitive salaries with another department that does a better job at getting financial compensation for their staff.
So we undertook a digital salary survey, and we will admit that we, with the best of intentions, have kind of ungracefully blundered our way into what we hope is the beginning of the conversation. So by no means do we consider ourselves experts, but we certainly just want to kind of start what will be hopefully a very robust and continued conversation. So I'm not sure, I'm sure most of you in this room are probably familiar, but just to give a little background, the American Alliance of Museums does release a comparative museum salary study every few years. The most recent one that they released was labeled for 2014. It contains salary information that's actually relevant as of December 31st, 2013. So this survey generally has basically narrowed it down to 51 standardized job titles that they consider, or at least at the time considered, the most common full-time professional positions within museums. But of those 51 job titles, very few of them felt particularly relevant to what we do, and it certainly doesn't necessarily capture the full breadth of what a digital team or a digital role could be at a museum. So we really kind of started off with this question of, without good comprehensive data, how can we make a case for more competitive compensation and benefits that will retain smart, capable digital folks in museum professions? So I kind of highlighted here the roles that are considered, that we would consider. So it's basically a director of an IT department, another sort of sub-manager of IT, and then the three more specific roles are social media manager, a web manager, and a graphic designer. So this doesn't really encompass kind of the full in-between. So our initial goal was to generate a tool that could paint a better picture of the digital landscape at museums and the organizations and businesses that support them. This is not a statistically significant survey, so just want to be very, very clear that this was an interesting exercise for us, but everything you'll see is based on a small data set and should just be considered the first step in a bigger conversation. So before you go tweeting pictures of our slides, just know that.
So some of you may remember or have seen we tweeted out kind of a request for you to fill out a survey, an online survey that went into getting this data that we're going to present. I'm Australian, so I say data. I'm saying data. Just make the translation in your head. I've had communication issues on that one before. So yeah, we sent out this. Thank you for everyone who did fill it out. It was very generous of you in trusting us with our small little one-paragraph blurb of what we were trying to do. And so, yeah, we will share out the link for you to see all the data on this. So hopefully we can continue a conversation and get more accurate data for us in the future. But we have a lot of questions for you, so we're going to run through this data knowing that it's not statistically accurate and want to get your feedback and understand what you think would be the next round of questions. For you who did do the survey, it'd be great to get your feedback. We want to make sure we're not angry about our situation. We just want to empower ourselves and our colleagues and our peers to know how to negotiate these situations, which I know is like somewhat of a frustration of the industry that we work in.
And we were lucky to be supported by our leadership when we obviously had to get permission to do this session and to kind of be representatives of our organization and talk about it. We did actually hear from our kind of hiring managers and people above that a tool like this would also be helpful for them to be able to advocate. As I'm sure we've all experienced in here, just generally digital literacy, it's not always the job of a museum CEO to completely understand what skills go into being a full stack developer. So just being able to sort of point to things that across the industry, this is sort of what a value is. So let's crank through. So just part of what we're sort of saying in this stipulation, we had initially wanted really to be able to compare both a museum and a consultant salary, but based on both sort of our network and kind of where we were, we basically got almost entirely museum. So we're at 93% museum. We also wanted to sort of see the difference even within a museum or kind of institutionally supported organization, whether you were nonprofit or for-profit. We got mostly nonprofit, so we only have an 8% private company response rate. We also did see an interesting spread of the kinds of institutions. So across the museums that did respond, we had a very large majority of art museums. So some of that is just what's out there in the world, and some of that, again, is our network and who's here. So moving on to a couple more demographics, we saw a predominantly female response rate. We have 63% women of the people who answered the demographic questions. Also a very white survey. We have almost 75% people who identified as white. So basically, if you are a woman and working in a nonprofit art museum, maybe you can glean some things from this. So here's kind of our first, where we're going to start. So it was really important to us to show you the count. We basically got 129 responses, and some of them were incomplete, or some of them were just difficult to discern, sometimes based on part-time salary rates and things like that. So this is the median salary based on, across all budget types, across all institutions, across all experience levels. So the median salary for museum was 58. For consultants was about 42, and in the nonprofit sector it was 56,000. In the private it was just similar, a little bit higher. So there's also some kind of low end and high end. Seeing that the consultant is actually lower to me just indicates that our data isn't great, but you can also see that at the high end of a consultant there's just more of an opportunity to see a larger salary. So again, really looking forward to trying to get some more data to flesh out these numbers.
And then we asked people to tell us their job title. And basically the way we went about this was Alison and I sat down and we reviewed the job titles from many different institutions and kind of gathered what we thought would be the best measures for us, simply because the AAM survey didn't have all those titles that we could pull from. So we first kind of asked people to find the best match for them based on the titles that we gave them. If you see in this graph, the blue is median salary, the orange is female, and the male is gray. So a lot of people in identified as digital directors or director of technology or software. Bizarrely, an uptake of males in database administrator for some reason with our survey. And then we reported the salary based on those job title matches. So pretty high, what you would consider pretty high in digital directors, chief digital or technology officer, web manager, ones that are commonly reported in AAM. So I think that just goes to show that there is kind of support around some of these titles that people understand, museums understand, and so can kind of argue for a better pay.
The one thing to sort of highlight here is that so basically we again had mostly female response rate, but basically in every single category, except for product manager, I believe in marketing manager, men are paid more than women, or women are paid below the median. So I don't think anybody is shocked to hear that. But I think it's just another reason. I was talking to Nikhil earlier today, and basically I think to a certain extent, we can't advocate for ourselves if we don't know what other people are making. So I think it does start with us to sort of, A, recognize what we're worth, but also B, not be afraid to sort of make sure that we talk to our colleagues and understand what people are being paid. So we also tried to do a comparison. Obviously, our data set was small, so we wanted to compare it against something that was slightly larger. So also within the survey, we asked people for their specific museum job title, which is a hilarious and could be a totally different topic all in and of itself, the variety of titles we all have. So we asked for that kind of control title that Anjuli just walked through. And then we also asked you to pick, if you were actually taking the AAM survey, which of those control titles would you have selected? So we were able to sort of mark that there. So the significant differences that we saw were obviously in people who selected this sort of digital director, which to me indicated the growth of kind of a CDO and how much that has increased since 2003, 2004. But then also sort of seeing at the other end how stagnant some of the salaries have been across collections and sort of marketing departments. So the next one is a breakdown a little bit more. So we sort of highlighted these value increases that were sort of interesting to us. So again, this director manager of information services and technology, these CDOs, these CXOs, kind of really seeing a prominent jump over the last couple of years. And then kind of being very upset to see at the end here that registrars and collections managers have not seen all that much of an increase over time. But social media has gone up about 29% based on these. We saw the photographer image specialists. Generally, that was people who maintain some sort of an image database or who are digital preservationists selected that. But again, it just goes to show what a range of the actual job functions were in kind of this one title that was selected.
And just to be clear, because it always takes me a few moments to get this table, what we're comparing is the 2017 salaries that people reported and self-identified their AAM title to the 2014 AAM survey that came out. So that's where the increase is. And so this was kind of our big question at the end of all of this. We tried our best to try and create some controls in language, but we do have a huge range of job titles and different departments. Everyone's growing and changing at a different rate. So how do we establish standards that we can use when we're in a quickly evolving industry?
And part of that conversation, I think we've had a lot of conversations, I think at MCNs and just between ourselves about where does digital live in your institution. So this is a breakdown of where people who kind of self-identified as having a digital function live in an organization. So what's cool and fun to see is that there are quite a few people who are in a digital department, but then if you actually look at sort of where the value sits, the next slide has just the actual numbers, but basically if you're in the IT department, you're generally more likely to get paid more in a digital department, and then as it goes down. So just sort of the general thing that I took away from this is that it's easy to place value on a technical skill. It's a little more difficult to place value on something that's slightly more creative or research-based in words. So that, I think we still have a little ways to go. But I think I preach the gospel of a horizontal, but we'll see how that affects value going down the line.
And then Alison came across Loic's recent article about digital departments, whether we should, well, he's advocating for horizontal, but he also did a survey of different institutions and where their digital lies. For our institution, our digital is somewhat horizontal, fragmentedly horizontal.
Yeah.
It kind of lies across IT, external affairs, and museum, or education collections is kind of where we fit. Do we want to go to the next one?
Yeah. So basically numbers are numbers and we don't have much control over that. But one of the other things we were asking people was, what are the rewards you currently get at your institution for a job well done? And what is it that you would actually like to see? So no surprise, most people, so the red here is what people were asking for. The blue is what they were currently getting. So most people are getting a thank you. So they're getting people, a one-on-one acknowledgement, which just, I'm saying it sarcastically, but that is actually valuable. I've had plenty of managers who don't go out of their way to say thanks. So it is sort of these non-financial things that people are doing. So they're getting thank yous, they're getting shout outs in staff meetings, they're getting included in an email to say good job. So recognition is great, but as you can see on the other side, people are looking for raises, they want title changes and promotions, they want vacation time, they want bonuses. So those are things that are a lot more difficult to advocate for within a budget. The fun little thing in the middle that actually is nice to see where we're meeting is what people want and also what they're getting, which is ownership over their projects. And I certainly can speak for the satisfaction that comes with, like, I may not be able to pay that Con Ed bill this month, but boy, am I excited about that project I'm working on. So it is nice to kind of have that in between. So some of the things that were sort of non-financial that we wanted to just shout out are that people are definitely looking for flexible work hours. They're looking for professional development and training, MCN, and they are looking for that ownership. So those are just some things that if you do have people that work for you, to think about ways that you can try to give them those sort of less financially it's easier to give those things than raises.
Our survey also had a free text for anyone to vent any other thoughts that they might have about this survey. And we did see some interesting comments that we wanted to make sure we put in here. Some people talked about raise policies and hiring freezes. So with hiring, some people were on indefinite contracts with no potential of moving to full-time. And so where do we place them in the survey? Raise policies are hard. I know at our institution, like many other institutions, you're given a percentage that has to be distributed. It's not really merit-based in that sense. It's kind of like we have to raise everyone together. As Alison was speaking about on her personal experience, internal candidates and
Yeah, well, and the difficulty of that people, it has become illegal in some places to ask people for salary, previous salary, your history. Yeah. But obviously, if you're within your institution, they have all your information. So it's interesting to sort of think about how people can grow. And we think a lot about the disparity between sort of the level we're at, and then you get to the directors, the VPs, and above. That there is up to like a $50,000 or $100,000 pay differential. It's like where's the in between? How do we meet in the middle there?
And then this last one is playing chicken, which I'm sure all of you know someone who had to kind of put themselves out on the line and go to the point of accepting another job and quitting before getting the raise or the kind of financial compensation for the value that they bring to the team.
So just some things that we were very focused about wanting to protect people's anonymity, but I think we did find ourselves almost limiting ourselves for that reason. So next time, we definitely want to think about a couple more things. We want to do a narrower scope. I think we need to start with comparing apples to apples first. We tried to do it outside of museums and inside museums. I think we just need to start in museums and begin at the beginning. We definitely want to control for cost of living. At first, we were going to ask people location information, but if we basically have your location, we have what kind of institution you work at, and we have your probably very specific and multi-tiered title, it's very easy to figure out who you are. So we didn't want people to feel like they were putting themselves out there, but we do want to make sure we can make a differentiation between a job in New York City or a job, in a small town. We did ask some questions about benefits, but we didn't actually drill down as much as we could have. And I think things on our mind are, paid family leave and things like that. So what are those other benefits that do have a financial impact for the organization you work for, but that really are important to employees? And then something interesting that also came up in the free text field was this idea of capacity. I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with the bureaucratic wheels of hiring at our institutions, that very often you're asked to wear multiple hats covering for somebody's position that still might remain open. And basically, are you at 120% capacity and making $40,000, or are you straight chilling at 50%, and making 90? So sort of what that is, I think, a lifestyle question that can really have an impact on value. So you're all here because you care about this, and I'm very excited to see so many faces. So we basically want to just open up the floor and see if you have any thoughts or questions that either we can answer or we can kind of answer collectively. We've got a little time.
From the 2014 survey data that you have, do you know if they have zip codes that you can normalize for cost of living in regions?
Yeah, they did regions. AAM does have like the specific regional, so they did break it down that way. We had thought about doing it by zip code, which was kind of specific, but they didn't even control within the regions whether it's a small town or a big town.
They don't do urban or rural midtown.
They did. So it's a little difficult too. Yeah.
For what you would do next, I think what I would like to see, and I hope we add in the future, is the source of the salary. So for instance, NEA grant, which the numbers are quite different than what I just saw.
Yeah.
This is a safe space.
Or is it, an endowed position, whatever it is, because this does affect those numbers as well.
That's great. That's awesome.
Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Repeating it for the audio on the thing to next time consider including whether it's a grant-funded position, a privately funded position, an endowment, just for control. Yes. Oh, right here. Oh, in the front.
In
Sorry.
front
Oh.
row.
I was wondering if there's some research that's gone on, particularly around jobs in the tech sector, that has struggled with the same thing of job titles aren't always the best thing. Have you considered looking at including a discussion of skills, where there's some other research out there where they've taken a more skills-based approach rather than what's your title?
Yeah, we were considering that, especially when it came to the capacity issue. How do we reflect that some people, for myself, as I lead the only digital part of the museum of my institution, we are constantly like, oh, this involves technology, we'll pull your team into it, which I think speaks to what skill set are we expected to kind of build in our job. And so, yeah, I think that was kind of one thing we were considering going further, like discussing that. What are your tasks? What is your skill set? What are your expected skill set? Things like that. But thank you. Yes.
I have sort of a two-part question, and the first one goes with capacity and also the idea about skill set. Have you thought about ways to account for people who are really doing several of those jobs at the same time? If you have a librarian who's also your full-time archivist and filling into that, I know there was a thing about skill set, and then also the added layer of management on top of that. It feels like the only jobs that are accounted for are like director of IT or things. If you're doing, I know cases where people are full-time librarian, full-time archivist, also doing digital asset management and also managing a team. I wonder if is there a way to account for that?
Sounds like a 400% capacity rating on that job.
Again, I think we were looking, obviously we did have people filling out from the director, manager, had the titles, especially in the museum, you have like director, senior director, coordinator, assistant coordinator. So we had all that, but obviously in the tech sector. They don't have all those kind of defined hierarchy levels. So we definitely have to account for that and ask questions about who do you supervise? Do you have any direct staff underneath you? And then I'm hoping that the task and skill set question would get to the point of people wearing too many hats. But I would open that up to the floor if anyone else has an idea of how to manage that kind of problem or that dilemma of representing what people actually do versus what their title might be.
To piggyback on that too, that I think something that I think about or talk about is that, you know, at the board level, people are being told, you know, oh, look at all the money we saved this year. We didn't have an increase, and that's sort of the positive thing. But ultimately, what that savings can often be is a vacancy. That means it's training somebody else to complete that role while somebody else is trying to be hired. And, you know, for me, there was a point where it took about 7 months until I, you know, had somebody supporting me. So can we, I know not all of us are in a position of power, but it's can we try to value retention rates more than like cost savings? Like what are and there truly is, you know, studies that show the longer, you know, you keep somebody, it costs so much more to retrain someone. So how can we try to revalue sort of what we're tooting, which horn we're tooting to show that we're being successful?
And just taking it upon ourselves, we are mission-based, obviously. We all work in this sector for a reason, and so when we do lose a staff member or a position, we want to fill that gap. We want to apply ourselves and do the best and keep the visitor experience at an optimal, and so we tend to overwork ourselves, and so how can we be more honest with our managers and directors and somewhat let things fail a little bit to show that it's not that you're saving costs or we're flatlining costs, it's that everyone else had to pull together to kind of fill that gap.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Just quickly, I'd be interested, without shaming anyone, who did fill out the survey in this room?
Hey!
Thank you. For those who didn't, or for those who did, you know, how comfortable were you with sharing this information? I guess, raise of hands, who would have been comfortable saying their region, their title, their salary? Awesome. Great. So that's good to know that, you know, we can pursue this without everyone freaking out on us. So, yes, Dusty.
Are you planning to, when you release the data, this is being part of your presentation, so you may have already talked about
That's
it,
okay.
sorry. No, I'm comfortable sharing my region if it's the researchers looking at it, but maybe
Right.
not putting that data set that says region, title, institution, type of institution.
Yeah. I think and also I will say out loud to the room that like we are limited in our skills in terms of evaluation. So obviously if anybody here is like super jazzed and excited, please come see us. We would love to make you part of this continuing conversation. Any of my fun evaluator friends. I see you. Hi, Kate. But that I think it is about like when you clean up the data, are there certain things you just don't make available? That it's sort of like as an aggregate, it's kind of fine to see these things. Like I'm not looking line by line and be like, oh yeah, that's totally, you know, so and so. But making sure that people feel comfortable with what went out. We did ask in the survey. We were and are still planning to kind of release this information through the website. But basically, if anybody didn't feel comfortable and didn't want to be included in that public data set, they were able to opt out. So if for whatever reason you do have a super specific job title or the only person, you know, working in a museum of Jurassic technology, you know, that you would feel comfortable not including yourself publicly.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for coming.